Tom Smith. I am born in Bay City, Texas, small town on the Gulf Coast, southwest of Houston. Went to school there through high school. Had a year at Texas A&I, that was the name of it then, in Kingsville, Texas. I had worked 15 months for the local post office to be able to afford to go to school 1 year, and spent all my money and came back and was working again when the Korean War started. And I was newly married. And I went home that day and I said to my bride, if had I known we were going to have a new war so quickly, we wouldn't have gotten married just yet. She didn't speak to me very much for about 3 weeks. But anyway, we worked that out, and I said, I'll wait till after the holidays in December. And that's kind of where it started. Anything else that I've overlooked?
Did you, when you enlisted, why did you choose to enlist, and what branch of the military did you choose?
Well, actually, I had friends that were going in the Air Force, and I thought, yeah, I'll go with them. But so on the fourth day, this story I like, whether anybody else does or not, on the 4th day of January 1951, 25 young men from this small, relatively small county show up at the post office in Bay City, Texas, to join the Air Force, a number for the Army. They had one recruiter that handled both services in those days. He didn't know what to do with 25 people wanting to join the Air Force. He calls Houston, where everything had to go through Houston, and they said, well, whatever you do, don't send them here. We have them lined up around the block. So that worked on, and after a while, then Houston decided they could send one quota of 12 men to San Antonio, to Lackland Air Force Base. That was what they laughingly call boot camp, or whatever. But so, meanwhile, the recruiter does everything he can to get 1 day's quota, the 12. He said, I'll get the 12 best, and I've got good people here. And so he asked me, I said, I'm not sure. I've already talked to the people, to the Marines, and then I said, oh, what the hell, I'll go with them. On the morning of the 18th of January, we all went down to the post office to see the recruiter to go to Houston. I picked up a morning paper, and on the bottom half of the front page, Air Force freezes enlistments. And I'd already made arrangements with the Marines just in case the Air Force couldn't. He said, call me. He was about 25 miles away. He said, call me, I'll be there in 25 minutes. So I called him, and I didn't have to wait. I offered any of my friends who wanted to go with me. There were 3 others that I had known in school. Nobody decided they wanted to go with me. So that's how I got in the Marine Corps, and I didn't think I should have to beg to go somewhere. That was absolutely great way it worked for me. The 3 of them eventually, by May or June of that year, got in the Air Force for 4 years. The Marine Corps found out. I went to join the Marines. Said, "Oh, you're married. You can't join them, but you can join the Marine Reserve." and we'll take you on active duty the same day. And so that's the way we did it. Then I stayed in the Marine Reserve until September of 1980. So I've obviously never been sad about that. I might say that the same wife that I was married to in 1951, we had 57 years, and she died in '07. But so that worked out too.
So why did you choose to stay in the reserves?
Well, I found out after that obligation, we signed the paper I signed for an indefinite period of time, and knowing full well what happened during the big war, World War II, they were in, the duration in 6 months is what they called it. Well, it was a little different. I found out after I got back, released from active duty, that I had an 8-year obligation. Didn't have to go to drills or do anything except belong. Well, to get a little more money, I stayed in the active reserve while I was going to the University of Houston. Then, when I was about ready for graduation, had someone ask me, a sergeant major that I had known back in Korea, said, "Did you consider going to Quantico?" And of course I told him no, had never entered my mind. But anyway, I went to Quantico through their Marine OC program. And that then took, after that required 3 years active duty. So it was more of my education, I suppose. Then I'm back to reserve. The Marine Corps was still getting rid of people, because that was before Vietnam, and they still had. So it was, like I said, it was educational, and I stayed active in the reserve unit for nearly all of that time.
So when did you head over to Korea?
Oh, the 13th replacement draft left San Diego on 15 September 1951. Board ship with, I have forgotten, but about 3,500 troops. And some of us got sick. Seasick can be, it isn't funny at the time, but you might as well. But when we got there, once we got to Korea and we were the first Marine unit that went in, that didn't go into Busan. We were the division was way up on the East Coast, and we went in there, went in landing craft, and then took trucks back over to the division, and they had us broken down by the time on board ship to the 4 major regiments. 1st, 5th, 7th were all there's infantry regiments, and the 11th Marines is artillery. And we were already broken down by numbers. And we got to, I finally got to the 1st Battalion. 50 replacements went to each of the rifle companies, and 35 of us went to weapons company. Now that was so that they needed some people, and then we went down further to the platoons, but and I thought I had originally been slated to go to artillery, and hadn't finished the Scout Observer School because my dad had died, and I went home on emergency leave. So I think, well, if they see I've got a basic 0800, which is artillery MOS, they'll probably put me in 81 mortars. And of course, they didn't look at, and they can change her. And the good news is I went to assault anti-tank platoon, which was better, as far as I was concerned, better than machine guns.
What is 81 mortars?
81 mortar, a mortar is like a small artillery piece. 81 that the diameter of the round is 81 millimeters, and a very common infantry weapon. It's kind of like little artillery that the battalion commander doesn't have to ask anybody else. It's his to use where he wants to. The assault AT, the assault, you understand what that is, and it includes flamethrowers and in those days 3.5 rockets, so that to help the folks in the rifle. I didn't get involved in using those because when I got there, 7th Marines, the entire regiment, was in reserve. In 5 days, then we went up. The regiment went up and replaced another regiment of the three rifle or infantry regiments. When things go as planned, 2 of them are up in the lines, and the third one is in reserve. They're there to be needed, to used if needed. But and things are relatively slow, and this was, getting on in the fall. They're like the 5th of October, and so we went back up and replaced the 5th Marines, and they came back into reserve. And we were in what I'd call static positions. We weren't patrolling. What was the most interesting thing we did, and had a permanent hole in the ground.
Where was that at?
It was in Korea on Hill 441, still on the East Coast. Not too far now. Some people that read this will remember this happened just before I got there. The Punch Bowl was a series of mountains that formed something that looked like a bowl, and that was the last big push of 1951 that the Marines, the Marine Division was involved in. And we went back up just north of there to set in the lines in defensive positions. And not anything really exciting. Occasionally you get some incoming artillery or mortars, and some people get killed. And I didn't. I used to kid everybody that not only am I a Marine, I don't even have a Purple Heart, which is okay.
Can you tell me more about that time and what it was like?
Well, it could actually be boring, and that was good. I remember one incident, or several incidents, but had been there a few weeks, and they decided to put in winter was coming, so they're going to dig what we referred to as a warm-up bunker. You dig into the side of the hill, and where you'll be able to have a stove, because there's nothing between us and the Chinese except a little space. But so anyway, we're digging this into the hole, into the hill, and we had some people out in front of our little hill working on some old barbed wire. We're setting up another apron of barbed wire, and they were just got a little too close together, and the Chinese didn't waste their ammunition. They 76 millimeter artillery round. They threw one at the people out in front that were working on barbed wire. The thing flew over our hill, hit right in the mouth of where that warm-up bunker was going to be, with 7 people working in it. And it was kind of nasty or messy. 2 KI immediate, 2 wounded, and the other 3 were just scared. Rightfully so, I might add. And we all jumped with stretchers, went down there, and there was a little humorous thing. One of the non-wounded, he says, as we come up, my buddy and I came up on him, I'm hit. And he's blood all over his right leg, or one leg. So my buddy had been there a while. He said, he's going to cut off. Oh, don't take off, don't cut my... And anyway, he wasn't hit at all. It was somebody else's blood. But I can understand. He could have been hit and not felt it, believe it or not. Anyway, that was... And had our company commander, who was back up with our 81 mortars a little bit behind us, and had a policy. If you shoot a gook, whatever you want to call them, which was chances if you would be at night while they were trying to come through the lines, then you get a shot of whiskey. And I didn't get a shot of whiskey. It was, the ones that did, they were always invariably trying to get in through our roadblock. There was a road went through our positions, dirt road, and I don't know why they thought that would be the best place to get through. They were just lazy as they were. If they were Americans, they walk right down the road, but instead of, and that was not a good place to walk. And I used to laugh. I said, if you keep that up, he'll be an alcoholic before we get out of here. But I can't say. He was from somewhere in upstate New York.
Who was this?
Oh, he was one of the troops that were manning our roadblock. I think his name was Boots, believe it or not, from somewhere in upstate. That's somewhere in New York besides the city. That's the way I had it. But then we there were a few other things, patrol here and patrol there, and I had a lot to learn, and I was still learning when I left, but in a different vein. But we went back then to reserve. the battalion, to make it confuse it possibly to someone that doesn't know, when there's one regiment in reserve. Now, of the regiments that are up in the line, generally, if all things are being, one battalion of that unit will be in a closer reserve, just a few, 1,000 yards back maybe. And so we went to that. Our other two battalions in the 7th Marines would come up and man the lines, and we went back then, and that's where we finally got some cold weather gear. That was the one time the Marine Corps had better gear than the Army did. We had thermal boots, and some people called them Mickey Mouse boots because of the way they looked, big and black. But anyway, we were happy to see those were very good. And luck has a lot to do with it sometimes. Our battalion was in reserve for Thanksgiving, and so our big meal. Then on the 10th of December, the entire regiment went back to the regimental reserve. There's a couple of pictures in those slides that shows the reserve area with a white background. And we were back there for both Christmas and New Year's. And at that time, my section leader, who I think was superstitious, and he was also from way up in the panhandle of Texas, but we become fairly decent buddies, and I was trying to learn everything I could from him. And he said everybody that he ever came close to being a friend with, one way or another, got sent to the rear. WIA, KIA, and sometimes maybe just transferred. So he's figuring a way to get me transferred to the rear without being one of the first two. So he said, "Can you type?" And I said, "Well, everybody can type." But so anyway, that was before we came back, or went back up in January. I got a late December. Someone tells me the battalion sergeant major wants to see you. We had him up, and it tells me where he is and how to find him. And so I went back there, and I was, doing what I was told. I knew there was no trouble. And he got there, and the man says, "Can you type?" "Yes, sir. I can type pretty good. I can type not speed, but." And that was that was part of having grown up in Texas. You don't say "sir" to first sergeants and sergeant majors as a general rule, but it was part of my upbringing. I thought he reserved it. It's not correct protocol, but I didn't mind. I preferred, and they didn't mind it particularly. They were old World War II veterans and earlier, and so just the way I talked. So he said, "Well, sit down." There was a desk out in front of the tent, little typing table. Sit down, and handed me a sheet of paper, said, "Type that." So I did, and rolled out a typewriter, handed it to him. He looked at it, handed it to a gunnery sergeant who was back there standing by his side, and he said, "Will that do?" He said and the gunnery sergeant said, "That's fine." So the sergeant major then turns to me, he said, "Go back and get your gear. You're going to be working with us." He said, "We live in this tent. and we work in that tent. And you're going to go back. We're in the rear area because all of the records, all the personnel records for the battalion were here. We don't get those too close to where they can be. And I said, do I have a choice? And the man had a sense of humor. You could say that. He said, no. And I'm torn with, I knew where he was living, and I knew where we were going, but it was my unit. They were the people that I went over with and gotten to know, and he said no, and I said, yes, sir. I went back to we were about a couple of miles away from where back from where he was located. I went back and got my gear and rifle and whatever. And they went on the 10th of January, 52. They went back up to where it was cold.
So when did you rotate home?
When did I go home? Then in May. I worked there until May. Now, during that time, we had moved from the East Coast, where we were when I got there, near that little fishing village, and over to the west, near the West Coast, just below Panmunjom. The peace on and off peace talks were going on. We were the 7th Marines, the entire entire Marine Division was positioned just below Panmunjom because it was the quickest way to get to Seoul, and we weren't planning, and the Marine Corps wasn't planning on them getting to, which they didn't, of course. So then in May, didn't know, but I found out someone in Congress decided that those poor reserves have been, they need to go home to their families. So by 1 July 52, you have to release those reserves from active duty. So that's why we went home in May. Got home late in May, 15, 20, I don't remember, and spent a week in San Diego. Being processed out, and went home.
What was the reception like when you got home?
Well, to get rid of this, I had written home and said, okay, I'll be there. Don't bother. Don't even think about coming out because I'll, be home in 10 days. So I get off the ship in San Diego, and there's my bride. She didn't listen to instructions so well, and that was her, and that was okay, as you might imagine. And I always told everyone that she was liberated long before it was popular, and had a mind of her own, and we just got along well. And then I knew that I would, it'd probably be a GI Bill. So I'm doing odd, I'd gone back to the post office, and they didn't have, they had to give me a job there, but it was as a substitute, working 30 hours a week wasn't, and I intended to go to school. So I did a couple other things. And then in January of 51, 52, I was back and I was at the University of Houston. And at the same time, working for the 6th Infantry Battalion, USMCR, and we got paid by the quarter for those weekend drills. And if I remember, we got paid, for every 3 months. I mean, it was worth, if I remember correctly, it was $60 every 3 months. And I must have needed it because I spent it all.
Is there any message that you would like to give to future generations?
I hadn't thought about that. But I suppose you could say, if you're good enough, we'd like to have you in the Marines.
Is there anything else that I haven't asked that you would like to share?
I don't think of anything. I'll probably think of it tomorrow. But it was, like I said, I really didn't do anything. I'll express it this way. After I moved to El Paso, 10 or more years ago, I decided that I was retired and I couldn't stand. So I said, well, I think I will go down to El Paso ISD school district, and maybe I can be a substitute teacher. And my wife, the same one, looked at me and she said, you can't do that. She didn't think, I'm sure she's known me pretty well, but didn't think I had the patience to do it. I think that's what. And I said, well, I believe I can. So I actually did that for about 5 years, and it was very interesting. It was another part of my education.
What was your profession? You said you went to university and then...
Okay, my thought to be was it would be in photography, in sales. I worked originally for a company that photographic equipment and supplies to industry, to professional photographers, to the amateur. We covered it. And through that, I got to another company with audiovisual equipment and materials, calling primarily on schools. And that was, I guess, what I was looking for. It's called, because the schools, really nice people for the most part. And we were there to help. And from that, we were bought by a company in Houston, a similar company, a little larger, out of San Francisco, which that took some adjusting. We had worked with the old audiovisual services in Houston. We'd worked straight commission, paid our own salary, our own expenses, and it was the best job I ever had. I never wrote an expense report. I never wrote they never asked where I'd been. I mean, it was your own business, so to speak. And it was different with the other company. But with the other company, they decided that when IBM made the first PCs, they became dealers for IBM PCs. And that opened up something quite new. And that was very interesting. New products, new thing. But selling, I would never thought, being a somewhat shy, retiring individual, that sales would be what I wanted to do. But enjoyed every minute of it.